Welcome to the academic book review community. Our mission is to support Nordic researchers in writing book reviews for academic journals. In our previous discussions, we have noticed that reviews are often placed to a lower rank in the genre hierarchy in academia. Even if you are a productive scholar with an excellent research record, you haven't necessarily written any book reviews. Academics are not encouraged to write book reviews as there are less economic and symbolic rewards available. How to change this situation and help researchers in entering this genre that is important for both researchers themselves to follow current research and to various stakeholders outside the university to do the same. In today's discussion, we will hear experiences from book review authors. How is it to write book reviews? What are the motivations, the challenges, and the do's and the don'ts? My name is Maarit Jaakkola. I'm co-director of Nordicom, the Center for Nordic Media Research at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. I'm also the editor-in-chief at NordMedia Network, that is a digital platform for media researchers run by Nordicom, and we are also hosting the academic book review community. I will host today this discussion together with my colleague Kristin Clay. So Kristin, please would you introduce yourself and today's guests?
Yes, I'm Kristin. I'm the manuscript editor at Nordicom, and I handle all of our English language publications, including our two peer-reviewed journals, Nordicom Review and Nordic Journal of Media Studies, and the books that we publish, anthologies and monographs. And today we have with us Associate Professor Gunhild Ring Olsen from Oslo Met in Norway, Dr. Matteo Stocchetti from Arcata University of Applied Sciences in Finland, and Kelechi Amakoh from the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And so now I have some slides with some questions ready. And so I'll share my screen. Can you all see it? Okay. Next slide. So anyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
Anyone who wants to jump in can. When did you write your first book review and why did you choose to write one? What about you, Gunhild?
Oh, I wrote my first in 2018, my first and only for now, because I only written one and I'm gonna write another one now. Just recently said yes. And it was published in 2019 and it was for Norsk Medietidsskrift. And it was about an anthology with 15 different contributors, and 10 of them were employees or students at Oslo Met that later became where I started to work. And some of them remember this review really well, but I can talk more about that later.
Matteo, what about you?
Yeah, my first review was a long time ago. It was in the early 90s, I think, or even might have been in the 1990. It was I was finalizing my doctoral degree, and that was the end of the Cold War, and there were a lot of publication concerning the future of NATO and so-called security balance, security system in Western Europe. And I was reading a lot of interesting books, and I started to develop the idea of what I would call in French bullshit. So there were so many publications writing things which, given my experience of security studies at the time and the knowledge of the Cold War history, made total nonsense. They were actually political programs. At the time, I was busy in a lot of things, and I thought that I cannot write an article because that's too complicated, too difficult. And I decided to put together a few books and ask one of the professors at the time who were supervising me. He was the chief editor of this Italian journal, Teoria Politica, if I could write a book review of that. And he said, yeah, sure, you can. And I did. And of course, when you write a book review, and if I can jump to the don't of book review, never said that what you I've read this bullshit. You know, if you review something, you have to find the good in whatever it is. Otherwise, better not to review. But the opportunity was there to somehow using different texts to express critical views, partly contained in different texts, about what was going on at the time, and possibly to give the reader some hints about what to look into, you know, into texts which were very much mainstream in those days. So it was then a long time ago, and there were mixed personal and more generic reason maybe.
Okay. And what about you, Kelechi?
Okay, I wrote my first review in 2019. I just completed my first year of my advanced degree program at the University of at the Ulch University, and I actually just wanted an outside the classroom experience, and I felt the best way to engage with my time was to engage with books that were related with my research interests. That's the intersection of media, politics, and technology. So I reached out to a book review editor of a journal, and I told the editor that I needed to review a book, and that was Digitizing Democracy. And I found that book interesting, and I said, okay, let me look at what's the current trend of democracy across the continent of the world, and what are authors saying about it. And this was what actually launched me into the deep of reviewing books for journals. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Various reasons. Nice. Okay.
I think I forgot to say why I did it.
Oh, okay.
But I can jump in and say that.
Of course.
And the reason I did it was because I was asked, simply as that. They asked me, could you do a review? And I had been working as a journalist then for 10 years before I did my PhD and turned into an academic. So at first I thought this is going to be easy. I've done this many times before, but then I of course discovered it's a different thing. So it was more work than I thought, and but it was also really rewarding because I just finished my PhD and just doing a different format, doing something that was a bit more like journalism than the academic genre. It was an interesting experience, and I liked it a lot, so that's why I agreed to do another one.
Great. Okay, next slide.
So it doesn't seem that your first experience was very challenging. Quite the contrary, you enjoyed it. But what have you been? What did you find the most challenging thing about writing the book review when looking back? Maybe we can start with Kelechi.
Okay. When I started the review, one thing I found challenging for me was the time, knowing fully well that writing an academic book review is a thankless job. It's not something that is well appreciated in the current day academia. I had to juggle it with other academic activities I had. So the time was what I was short on. Two, just like Matteo said, you have to look for the good in a book. So that made me that I actually paid more attention to my reading. I couldn't just do a skim read because I know that people would also pay attention to what I have reviewed. So I devoted myself to it, and it could be challenging sometimes, and you just want to skim through, but no, you know that you would have to review after all. So I gave more time to it. So these were the two challenging things that actually came up to me while writing my first review. But after all, when I saw how rewarding it was for me and refreshing, the subsequent reviews I've written actually has been like a stroll in the park in terms of enjoying what I love to do and the kind of books I review. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it takes time to find the routines as well. When you are writing your first review, you kind of have to get familiar with the genre and the style and how to do it. And in our previous discussions, we have also talked about the possibility of it might be a bit intimidating to write the first review or to jump into the role of a reviewer, because writing a review is basically from expert to expert. So you have to know your field very well in order to localize the new piece of work within the research field, right? How do you think about it, Gunhild?
No, if I had known, because I was a bit naive, I think, thinking that I know this. I've been writing a lot of reviews, but of course it was a whole different genre. So my first challenge was finding out what was expected, and I of course asked the editor, and he gave some vague answers. And then I started asking colleagues that's been writing reviews before, and they had so many different views upon this. So it was kind of hard to understand what the genre was about. So I think this webinar is really smart, because I would have enjoyed watching these videos that you have put out. So that was the first challenge. And then, of course, time, as Kelechi said, it's not that you have plenty of time, and it took longer than I expected, as you said, Marit, because you have to know the field, right? And I also had some trouble with choosing the point of view in this anthology. Should I take the stance of the reader, like the student reader, the academic reader? Because this was a book aimed at, and they listed like 5 different groups, so it was supposed to like be for everyone. And also, should I take into account that this was kind of an idealistic project, because they included students and researchers that were not that experienced, and of course that has something to say about it affects the quality, and what should you like? Should you be really strict, or should you take that into account, and how much should you write about that? And also I knew many of the contributors, probably as many of you have experience as well, and I was like, can I be totally objective here? How is that possible? And I really had to go several rounds and don't think about like future job options, etc. Because that's of course something you have to try not to think about. So I found it a bit challenging in all these aspects.
You are highlighting the difference between a journalistic and an academic book review. What do you think, how these genres differ from each other then? What are the main differences?
I think it's much of the same, just that the academic review is more of everything. You should be more informed. You should be even more transparent in your argumentation. And maybe it's not accepted that you should be as direct as you are in the journalistic variant, because I used to work a lot on that, just being clear about my impression, of course, but at the same time saying it in a way that wouldn't be as direct as I would have done in a journalistic review. So it was kind of a balancing act, I think.
Yeah, there is also very much a lot of research on textual research, linguistic research on book reviews, where the researchers have found that there is kind of politeness or discourse of politeness and rhetorical strategies for creating politeness in order to avoid any conflicts with colleagues and potential colleagues and so on.
Yes.
So,
and I actually asked one of my more experienced colleagues to read through it before I sent it to the editor. And this was one of the things he was like saying, oh, you can't say it that way. You have to like tone that down. And then I didn't want to do it too much, because I wanted it to be clear what I meant and what my experience was reading this book. But of course, I also had to follow some of his advice, because it is a genre of its own.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion to let someone, a colleague, to read the text. What do you think about being critical, Matteo? Do you find it hard?
This is not. I was expecting to answer the question everybody else answered. This is like
Ah,
a
sorry.
trick, but yes, I like that better. Being critical. If you're talking about academic work, there are conventions which has to be learned in the first place and then possibly applied to the best of our skills, our knowledge. I'm not talking about critical theory, applying critical theory, what we do, about critical as an attitude. Academia is about being critical. You know, I don't have a problem picking up a conflict if necessary, for the ideas, of course, not for personal idiosyncrasies. And if we talk about the challenges in the book review, I think usually because in the beginning of a career, book review is one of the first publications you try to have. It's a very great opportunity to learn about these conventions and to test it on yourself. You know, sometimes we read things which are even when we are unexperienced, which we can hardly accept or simply we can reject. But what counts is not our personal emotions, but the quality of the arguments that we can come out with in order to support whatever judgment we want to formulate on particular ideas. It's always, I tell my students as well as my colleague, criticism should always address ideas, opinion, or the text through which ideas, opinion are formulated, not the individual. So I should say, you have written something stupid, or not, you are stupid, because otherwise it breaks down. That's not academia. And I would say this is um, this this kind of conventions, this kind of protocols is what unite academia and democracy. In democracy, we criticize ideas sometimes quite strongly. We should not criticize individual as individual. Otherwise, something terrible happen. So I think this is an important challenge. On top of that, when you write a book review, at least as far as I'm concerned, immediately one might realize how ignorant we are about what we are trying to talk. Every text is a piece of is a tassel in a broad picture. So when you are young, especially in the beginning of a career, you know, you realize how much stuff you haven't read. But it's a great opportunity to at least start to do some of those readings if you haven't done it before. So challenges are what makes us grow, and being critical. I cannot see how not to be critical. Of course, we are living in a time in which people write what they think is liked by those who are in power. But that is not about truth, it's about power. That is not about, you know, develop our intellect, is about developing a career. And of course, piece of every dimension of life has to negotiate with these fears that is up to individual, you know, how much risk he or she wants to take. I think about the notion of parrhesia in Michel Foucault. To criticize somebody, especially if he's a senior compared to us, you know, we should not trash the juniors because there's no glory in that. We should help the juniors to get, you know, senior. But if we want to engage, let's engage with the senior, with the, you know, the big names of whatever discipline. That is an act of parrhesia, is an act of bravery. You know, you take a personal risk. In some cases, you might even risk your career, especially if we are in a nepotistic environment where career is determined by personal connection rather than by merit. But then you grow something very important in yourself. You grow this, you know, your spirit or your chi in Eastern philosophy. You know, something that will come with you for the rest of your life. And I think this is apart from symbolical remuneration, you were talking about money or symbolical gratification. I think the main gratification is with yourself. If you feel you have done something that leads a certain debate a little bit closer to a certain idea of truth, which of course then you must be always willing to trash if necessary. There is this metaphysic dimensions, which I think sometimes is forgotten, but I think for the upbringing, especially of younger generation, is crucial. And sometimes the older generation don't give a good example, but you know, that's part of life.
That sounds very interesting, and now we are going into the deeper levels of criticism. But are you suggesting that we should be kinder towards junior scholars when they have published a book? Or did I get it right?
It's not about kindness. Kindness is a private thing. I think we should be appropriate, perhaps, and depends also what is our connection. if an ex-student write a book, I want to be the last person to write a book review, because of course I'm not only objective, but it's like my child, if you want to put it in this paternalistic thing. On the other hand, if even the closest colleague that I can think of wants my opinion, it's my I should be as honest as possible. You know, I'm the point is not to be kind, but the point is to be helpful. Sometimes be helpful means being helpful never means to compromise with standards, of course. No, we have to distinguish the way we express things from what we express. Of course, we should be polite, kind, and civilized, I would say, possibly clear. Maybe that is the most important thing. And then within this, try to be as clear as possible. We should try to help the person who's writing the text, even if he's a senior, because the whole point of academia, like democracy, is that we grow as individuals by communicating. So our ideas can be outrageous, but if we don't have somebody honest enough to tell your idea is outrageous, we'll never realize that it's outrageous, to put it very simply. So I think the main goal is to help to improve the text, if you're talking about. When it comes to the book review, the text is already there. There are stakes, symbolical and stuff. I think never trashing, but maybe help the readers to understand why it might be useful to read this book. It's all a mirror game. You realize something by seeing something else. You realize that, a darker shade of white is darker because there is a brighter shade of white, if you want to put it like that. So you need a little bit of everything. If the text is so bad that you have nothing good to say, then don't do that review. Leave it to somebody else.
That was an answer to the question. Any tips for what not
yeah,
to do? So,
yes, I switched slides because we were talking about these questions.
This is the single tips. By the way, I did that mistake once, and I still regret. I did it very early in my career, and this is still one of the things that, academically speaking, I regret the most. I did unnecessary damage, and it was very stupid of me. So I know what I'm talking about.
Good. We'll make a note to ourselves. I would still, talking about the challenges, I would still like to ask about the point of view, because you are also, Matteo, you are talking about the reader or the audience, and Gunhild said that she had some difficulties in finding the proper point of view, and that, I think that's quite an appropriate question, because usually books are written to quite a large audience in a way that, well, it's the researchers within a certain field, but it's also the students. It may also be the teachers, and it may also be some stakeholders of academia, and maybe even the interested layperson out there. Not all books, but there is a great variety of different strategies, of course, but it's not always that easy to say what is exactly the audience of the book. So Kelechi, did you have did you find it challenging to find the audience, the target audience, when you were writing the book?
One thing I made sure to check was what was in the author's head while writing, and it's always clearly spelled out in the book. So, for example, a book written about opting out from digital media, the author was clear about the people she wanted to reach out to. Those are the people that are hooked on social media, people that are very addicted to it. So it cuts across all age groups and all. So in that sense, I also put myself in that shoe and see, okay, to what extent does this book address the target audience that this author actually aimed at reaching at? And that helps me to actually review whether it met the objectives and goals. And also, in a way, it helps you to know what extent of review can you do on that kind of book that has been written. The aim of the review is never to trash, like we've all said on this platform. The aim of the review is actually to engage with the text and ensure that how does this text actually add to the general discourse in that field? How does this text actually contribute meaningfully to the academic discussion that is ongoing and the debates that we already have among academics? And that's what the review should also do. And that's why when I would always review a book, I would always check what is the author's aim, what are the objectives, and that helps me a lot in couching my review. Yeah.
Good. Before going to the next question, you can switch the slide, Kristin. I think it's enough about the challenges. Let's go further. What is the objective of the review? What's the aim of the review? It's not the question we have on our slide, but I'd like to hear your personal clarification of that. If you have one, what is the review for? Before going to the question, what a good book review should contain. Any definitions of review?
From my own perspective, a review is an eye opener. It gives you an eye into what the book talks about. So, for example, there are people that are in some part of the world that can't access these books, maybe due to the monies, the resources are not there to actually buy these books, but they have access to these reviews through free copies online and maybe open access. So a good review should be able to address what this book is telling us about, how does it add to the discussion, and it can help scholars that want to actually deep dive into that book to actually know first if it's something worth giving their whole time to. And that's how I see a book review. And a good one should actually touch about all these aspects and provide an insight for anyone that is willing to actually read the book further and gain more insight about it. Yeah.
Good. How about you, Matteo and Gunhild? What is a good book review?
Okay, I will start. I was trying to be gentleman.
I thought you were speaking, but were muted. It looked like you were moving your lips. I'm sorry.
Do you want to go first, Gunhild?
No, go ahead. I'm the gentleman.
Excellent. And I'm the mademoiselle in distress.
Yes.
If I can use the metaphor of the puzzle, I think every text that we review is the one piece of the puzzle, which of course out of our expertise, because we should expert, otherwise we should not write a book review, we should be able to see how that particular text connect to the puzzle, to the bigger picture, which is the debate or the debates. So I think that in this perspective, the main point of the review is to give the broader audience, and it doesn't matter really who they are, because book reviews, the language should not be so problematic. Rather, what matters is what kind of people is interested in those debates, which I try to relate to the text. Can be teachers, researchers, students, it doesn't matter. But the important thing is to provide a convincing arguments how this book relates. Whatever is said, and usually there are many, of course, many topics, maybe arguments, so it can be, it's much more complicated than my metaphor might suggest. It's not a bidimensional thing. How that relates to the debate, issue, topic, lexicon, whatever concept of the larger debate, and possibly if it gives a contribution, what is the nature of the contribution. On top of this, of course, a review is written for, being noticed in the early stage of a career, to make a certain points about certain debates. Sometimes there is a competition between approach. In that case, if somebody is a established scholar, to write a book review makes a very powerful point. If Habermas would write a book review of one of us, that would be, quite interesting to see. It would give some added symbolic value, of course. But I would suggest, especially for younger scholars, not to worry about career too much. Try to figure out what is the truth. Try to concentrate on, their own. I think the German word is Bildung for this kind of practice, pedagogical practice, self-development. I mean, writing a review, apart from explaining other people what is the importance of that test? It's a moment of self-development, if we can put it like that.
Mhm. Hmm.
And
Then
maybe it's my turn, the gentleman's turn. No, but I think taking the project seriously and not wanting another project. I think that is what many, or not many, some reviewers do. If they would like want another book, and from the beginning they would like it to be disposed differently, and maybe they have another scientific political view than what is represented in the book. And if you have those issues, maybe you should say no to writing that particular review if you can't go past that, because I think some of the reviews that are not making anyone smarter, neither the audience nor the people that has written the book, are the reviews that do not take the project seriously and go into it and try to understand it and place it in comparison to other works, but just say that, oh, this should have been different from the start, because some reviews are like that, not too many, but some are. So yeah, that would be, I think, a good review takes the text seriously.
We've touched upon some different ways of using the book review and different purposes it has, but do any of you have any ideas for experimentation or changing the genre, developing it further? Matteo, what about you?
I somehow fear that you pick on me first. Okay, there are some pedagogical functions of book review, which means book review not necessarily to be published, but as exercise in the classroom. And I've been using some the same technique of book reviewing on articles, shorter text, and asking my students to fill in a matrix and try to figure it out 4 things. First, what are the main points of the author? Secondly, what are the arguments that the author brings in support of his or her points? Thirdly, what is the opinion of my students, of the reader, of those points and those grounds? And fourthly, what are the grounds for the opinion of the student? So again, we are playing with this difference between opinions and the grounds for opinion in understanding other people's opinions and grounds for opinion, but also developing our own, which pedagogically speaking is very important, especially nowadays where you probably heard about the post-truth condition, when people engage with politics based on emotions instead of opinions or interests or ideas. And this is very dangerous because, once again, democracy requires opinions, no matter what, but good grounds for opinion. Emotions belongs to the private sphere. You know, they should be, to a certain extent, kept in check when we are dealing with others. Otherwise, we go back to a pre-civilized era. And of course, nowadays, students, unfortunately, they are more inclined to engage with visuals without being able to interpret, of course, the complexity of visual images, instead of engaging with text, thinking, and possibly develop their own text. So this is what you were looking for, but I think if we take book reviewing as a specific kind of intellectual exercise and we change it a little bit, shorter text, maybe not 100% academic, it's very important pedagogically. It trains students, young people, especially undergraduate students, I'm thinking here, you know, into developing the kind of reasoning which then in some forms might be, we call it academic or democratic, but it doesn't matter. It's about being able to understand other people's opinion and to express our own in relation to those who are being expressed. So in a sense, to dialogue, you know, with others.
It's interesting that you say that it could be a valuable tool to use in the classroom, because it reminds me of what you said, Kelechi, is why you did your first one is just that, and that you chose to do that on yourself. So it would be a good thing if teachers brought that into the classroom. Absolutely. Do either of the other two have any input?
Matteo has actually said it. Just due to my interest and my special interest to just develop myself, that's why I actually took this route. But if it's made more, if it's inculcated into the the teaching process, into the classroom to some extent. It can also help people develop and grow their critical thinking skills. Yeah, sure.
Yes. Gunhild, what about you? Any ideas for
From
experimentation?
the experience of my one review? No, I listened to Matteo and Kelechi. They have many good ideas, and bringing in the students, I think, is a really good idea.
Yes.
And also, I think it's a difference between reviewing an anthology and a monograph. So maybe, I don't know, have some bullet points that you should look after in the different genres. I don't know. It's kind of different things you are looking for in the two different genres there. So and often nowadays there are anthologies. It's a popular genre. So maybe, I don't know, I think it's a good thing having this webinar to be more clear about what is important and the subgenres of the genre as well, because not everything is the same, I think.
Yes, and there's many topics for future development too, which is what this community is about. So moving on to our last question. It's a little bit of a trick. In 5 words or less, what is your main advice for someone deciding to write their first review? Start with Kelechi.
They should go for it if they want to do it. Majorly, I would advise that they go for research interests that align with theirs, so that it helps them develop, and in the way they create an expertise in that field. Yeah.
Okay, they should go for it. Great. And what about you, Matteo?
5 words. Understand what the author is trying to say. 5.
Okay. What the author says. And
Start
good.
with.
I would say be transparent, thorough, and clear, and do it.
Great.
Yeah.
Very good advice in a nutshell. Thank you all. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
I would like to say that you should take help of the community, either the book review community at NordMedia Network or the community you have around you, your colleagues. Yes, thank you for my part as well. These were very good suggestions how to go forward with this task that most of us are maybe not that familiar with. So thank you for sharing your insights with us, Matteo, Gunhild, and Kelechi. And thank you for all who watched us today. And we have some more resources collected on our webpage regarding book reviews. So take a look at them. Whenever a book is published and it seems interesting and relevant to you, I guess we can all share the piece of advice that don't ever hesitate to share your opinions on it and write a book review. It's rewarding, it's a learning experience, and you can discover some more dimensions by making your reading experience also into a more structured experience by writing about the book. So together we can renew the review, as our slogan goes, right?
Renew the review.
Yeah. Thank you and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.